explain to me this affinity for naming all those settlements, for things that crop up colorful in spite of all the clouds. Like you know it's there, but don't look down. There's a perfect place that's not quite now. And Jesus has a lot of love, but the good book might not let you out. Let me go back over all again. That little scar is nothing in the arms of all the things have yet to come. I'd like to call it no big deal, but we both know I'd be lying. I can never come back if I don't go. And that plan may have been a waste, but we'll make it up sometime. I'll find you when we've grown apart enough. Where there's a candle, there's a light. A shadow dances right behind, singing, come to me, son, let me test your luck. From where we got flowers by the fifth, where we learned backhanded love. Or if you come off clever enough, you don't have to cover anything up. And this city's done me strange, though I'm as courageous as I came. And that courage sure is honest, but can feel like such a fickle thing. And explain to me this affinity for naming all those settlements, for things that crop up colorful in spite of all the clouds. From the roses city of my birth, the golden man stands in a cherry town, to a road stop named for mountains and women and their family ties, and flowers by the fifth. In spite of all, in spite of all, in spite of all the clouds. Let me go back over or again. That little scar is nothing in the arms of all the things have yet to come. Like to call it no big deal, but we both know I'd be lying. I can never come back if I don't go.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. People are still connecting, I see. I recognize a lot of names in the attendees that we know. Hello, everyone, and new friends alike. Thank you for joining. Very warm welcome to our webinar today. My name is Mandy Elder. I am a learning officer at the Ford Family Foundation, where we ensure that children have the family, education, and community supports that they need to succeed in life. Today, I'm welcoming you to this lunchtime webinar where we'll hear from co-authors of a recent article that was published in a nationwide peer-reviewed journal called the Foundation Review. And we'll learn about what it really means when the state's largest private foundation invests in something as important and vital to our communities as community building. And we'll also hear what this means for people across our rural region in Oregon and Siskiyou County. So not only will we hear from the co-authors, we have Ann Kubish, Max Gimbel, and Cassie Allen on the screen. We'll also hear from community builders, including our colleague Maurizio Valerio, as well as Lindsay Jones, Brenda Smith, and Megan Fairman. Say hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
We know that rural residents hold the wisdom about how to improve well-being of children and families in their communities, and we believe that working together through community building is what will get us there. So we have an hour together today where we'll learn about that, and we'll hear from panelists first. And then please put your questions in the Q&A function below, and we'll have 15 or 20 minutes toward the end of the webinar to get to all of those. And as we begin, my invitation to you is to just consider setting aside all of the competing priorities you have during a lunch hour. Maximize your Zoom screen so that it covers your Outlook and your Teams notifications. Set your phone down and just give your mind the gift of presence for the next hour. And without further ado, I'll introduce our first panelist, which is our former president and CEO of the Ford Family Foundation, Ann Kubish.
Thanks, Mandy. And welcome to everybody. I want to say hello to everybody. And do we just jump in right now, Mandy, or are you going to introduce everybody else? Okay, so I'm going to introduce this by saying, why do we care about community building at all? And so when I think about what it takes to make change for kids and families and communities, I always think about two complementary strands of work. One of them, of course, is the programmatic work. That is the best practices that we want to put in place based on research and experience and so on. And to best practices to produce positive outcomes for kids, for families, for communities, and so on. But there is a second strand of work. It's about what it takes to put those programs in place and ensure that they're effective. And that's what we call community building. And what is that second strand? It's about the capacity at the individual and organizational and community level to put things into place. It's about power to make things happen at the community and system level and hold systems accountable. And the visual image that I always use is of the double helix of the DNA strand, where you have one side that is the programmatic or the technical elements, but the other side is the community capacity and the community power. And so that's what the Ford Family Foundation calls that second strand, community building. And the Ford Family Foundation has defined that, and you'll hear more about that over the course of this discussion. The Ford Family Foundation calls it the 4 C's, that is creating connections among people, building capacity at the individual, organizational, and community level, working together to create community-based change, and ultimately the 4th C is creating a community building culture that can reproduce over time and build on positive experiences. So why is this important? Well, I think at the Ford Family Foundation, we have believed for our entire history that you can design all of the best practice programs you want, but if you can't put them into place and you can't put them into place effectively, then you have nothing. And so you need high capacity to do that. Moreover, if you have high capacity organizations and communities, that makes those places more investable by ultimately the bigger dollars. We are a philanthropy. Those are important dollars, but the big dollars are the public sector dollars. And we believe that if you invest in that kind of capacity, it makes those communities more investable for the big dollars. Also, we believe that if you're taking a community building approach, you're taking the lead from the community and responding to community priorities. And when you do that, whatever unfolds will be owned by the community and will ultimately be more sustainable and have more impact over time. And in the end, ultimately, it's really about increasing the power of communities to make the change that they want to see, to hold the systems accountable that are meant to work to support kids and families and communities. It's about the power to bring community voice together to plan and to develop a vision and a plan for the future of their communities, and to also to influence systems. And I want to emphasize this part about bringing people together and the power of people, and really all people, especially those who are usually left out from the decision-making process. And this is the core to the foundations, the Ford Family Foundation's equity work, because setting a table and making it possible for everyone to participate in the process is what's key to building the future of a community. And the Ford Family Foundation has been doing this for many years. Is it perfect? No. But after lots of years, the foundation has found that holding community building out as a priority and a value makes sure that everyone is vigilant and attentive to all voices in the community so that everybody's part of the change process. And so the reason we wrote the article that we're featuring today, which is called Community Building as a Philosophy and Not an Initiative, is that we believe that this second strand of the DNA double helix is something that is underattended to. Public sector funders hardly ever invest in this kind of thing for reasons that I think we probably all know, some of which is that it's perceived as process and soft stuff. But in any case, that makes it all the more important for philanthropy to prioritize it. And that, in the Ford Family Foundation's view, is the role for philanthropy. Now, sometimes philanthropies do it, but it's usually in the context of a specific program. Philanthropy will say, we want to do this initiative, and so therefore we want to bring in community voice. And often it's sort of on a one-time basis or a time-limited basis. But we at the Ford Family Foundation would posit that it is investment in this community building work that is the obligation of philanthropy. It's the privilege of philanthropy to cover the costs of training, convening, capacity building, strategic planning, And all of those things that I think all of us on this webinar know are key to making change, especially for the most disadvantaged. And so foundations can invest in greasing the wheels. And the Ford Family Foundation does it throughout all of its grant making and scholarship programs. And in fact, the Ford Family Foundation has a tagline that says community building is in our DNA. So it's everywhere. But we also, the Ford Family Foundation also has an entire department devoted to just community building. And this webinar is primarily the story of the work of that department, because there are concrete actions and stories to tell about what the foundation did and what kind of impact it had. And so I'm going to turn this over to the director of the Department of Community Building, Max Gimbel, to take the next step.
Thanks so much, Anne, and thanks all the participants for being here. People, especially community builders, are busy. They are tired, especially on or both, especially on a Friday afternoon. And so it's people like you who show up and have conversations like this here and in your community that makes all the difference. So thank you so much for being here. This portion of the webinar, I'll share a little bit more, like Anne said, about what the community building approach is, some things we've learned along the way, some challenges, and then I'll turn it over to some colleagues and community partners to get even deeper into it, what it looks like on the ground. But before I jump in, I do want to take a moment to help us feel what we mean by community building. So I would like to invite you to reflect back on a time in your life, in your community, and this could be community defined however you want to. It could be, family, a friends group, a geographic place, a network across the globe. Think back on that time when you felt a deep sense of belonging, a palpable feeling of collective power, a remarkable group achievement, or a particular moment of pride or purpose or hope. And these are often tinged with magic and the effort of overcoming hard things for success. Thank you. Hopefully you connected with a moment in your life just to help you feel more personally grounded in this. And so in order to help think about what community building is, it's all the quiet stuff that would have led up to those magic moments, and that then helps those magic moments transform into better outcomes for kids, youth, and families in your communities. So that's what we're working on to catalyze the frequency, duration, and effects of those moments here. So I want to jump into the Rural Community Building wheel. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. Let's see. Can folks see that? Okay, great. So this community building approach was developed about 8 years ago in partnership with local community builders, foundation staff. Can you not see that, Anne? Uh-oh, and you're muted.
It's very big. I can only see a portion of
Yeah, the screen is,
Oh.
we're only seeing a quarter of the screen, Max.
Okay, this is helpful
The
feedback.
top
Thank
left
you.
quarter. So if you can resize it, I think that'll help.
Yeah. Is that better?
Yep, that's better. Can you even
Better.
do more?
Okay, can we go with that for now? Is that all right?
Yep, yep. Oh, that's
Okay.
perfect. We can see the entire wheel now.
Okay, great. So this community building approach we developed about 8 years ago in partnership with lots of folks, local, national staff, board, community. Developed it, redeveloped it, redeveloped it, redeveloped it as we do with tools like this, all with community input. And we're really proud of the one we have here, which is fully bilingual, integrates lots of our previous documents. So we hope it holds a ton of useful, rich, inspiring information. I'll do a quick walkthrough, but I won't get into a lot of details because I want to leave that for my colleagues who are closer to the ground. But just as general orientation, you can see it's organized in the center with a set of principles. The next ring out is our purpose or outcome areas, the 4 C's that Anne referenced. And the third wheel out are our practices, which is just on the ground activities that communities could do. And so that way you can find yourself and wherever you need to be in there. And the second and third wheel also connect. You can see, for example, in connections, the same lovely green color. And so connections, that outcome relates back to the practices of listen to learn and come together. Obviously, we know the work in community doesn't work as perfectly as this, but it hopefully just holds enough of the work. And when we developed this, the idea wasn't to create a new way of thinking about community building. We really went to distill the practices that work best in community and give it a shape and a form that hopefully others would find valuable. So that's primarily what we're doing. So we don't feel like we invented anything other than the process to hold this information and then share it back out again. So here are the principles. Anne talked on some of these already, but go to where the people are. And so for us, is a question of respect, access, and equity as well. Not everyone can get to Roseburg, and so we do our best to get to community as much as possible. It's why we have field coordinators. That's a position that we developed as a result of this work. As you can see on this map, we've got 7 field coordinators, 4 primarily geographically located. We have 2 that focus primarily on the Latinx community, and 1, Tracy Kennedy, that just started with us to help us with our tribal relations and connections there. The next one is start with what you know and build on what you have. And that's really about honoring the work that's come before and honoring and lifting up local assets. Be profoundly inclusive is the third one. We have learned that the greater the inclusion and belonging on the front end, the more durable the solutions on the back end, even if it takes longer to get there. And for us, this means not just race and ethnicity, although it's critical, but also age diversity, newcomers, old timers, different political stripes, and sometimes, get this, things as polarizing as North County and South County, which those of you in Oregon, that can be a real thing. And we've also recognized that this Be Profoundly Inclusive is some of our most difficult work, and communities time and time name this as some of the greatest hurdles to get over. So we try and put a lot of attention in this area because we know it is difficult and very meaningful. The last one is keep the community at the center, and share this already, but without local wisdom guiding and leading the work, anything that we would do in community would just likely be just another failed philanthropic initiative. So this one is really important to us. Anne mentioned the 4 C's. I'll go over, share these a little bit briefly. So connections, as you can see, about building caring, lasting, and inclusive relationships. On the ground, the support for this might look like listening sessions, supporting reader boards, community websites, monthly meetings around needs and offerings, things like that. The second one is around capacity. It's having people, groups, skills, and resources needed to shape the future. This, in our world, could look like supporting communities with training, sending a team to a conference, coordination work around some complex project, data collection or analysis. The third one, community-led action, is knowing where the community wants to go and taking action to get there. And this could be supporting visioning work or action teams or momentum funds for projects to get them off the ground. And that last one is around possessing a sense of community, unity, pride, and resiliency. And for us, this work looks a lot like supporting community celebrations, storytelling, and other things that shift local narratives. We do have on our website, and Mandy may drop that link in there, all these built out with connections to the practices, as well as concrete examples of what this looks like, and also concrete activities that communities could try if they want to lean into some of these things. I'll just share a couple of positive outcomes we've witnessed through engaging in this work. One is that people are engaging. People seem to be excited and wanting to have conversations around this. Individuals are seeing themselves as change agents and leaning into the work more. People are reporting that the work is getting done and positive things are happening in their communities. Another positive outcome that we've seen is through the many disasters, and we've all experienced our fair share of disasters the last decade, that communities that were really well versed and well grounded in these 4 C's seem to fare better coming out of these things, having a strong sense. And so we believe that this work builds and is key to community recovery and resilience. And the last thing I want to mention here in terms of some benefits that we've seen is that these community building dollars that we support here have been able to attract other investments. We did some research a few years back that showed that around $300,000 of our investment in 3 different communities led to $15 million in investments. Although a disclaimer, results probably vary by community, but that was some of the data that we collected. And then in terms of challenges, there's challenges of scale, where we can be, how we choose where we are, how we can make sure we're being as equitable as possible with the resources we have over a geography. Another challenge is how do we remain issue agnostic, especially with a foundation that has a very strong strategic framework and finding that right space there. And the third one is how can an intervention like this still provides supports at a time when there's so much division and polarization in community. And we may find this 2024 election season really put some of this work to the test. Finally, I'll end with a hope for the future, which is that our work energizes not just the foundation and the communities that we work in, but a larger community building movement where a community building approach like this is the easiest and go-to approach, and where those magical moments that we all felt a few minutes ago about belonging, achievement, and hope lead to positive transformation for rural children, youth, and families, and in your lives as well. So I'm going to turn it over to my dear colleague, Maurizio Valerio, who is our field coordinator in the Eastern Oregon region, and you can see him, the spot lit up there on the map, and I will stop my share.
Thank you, Max, and good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to be here in great company. And I'm honored to call many of you friends and community building partners, sometimes partners in crime, but that's a different story. My name is Maurizio Valerio. I work as a field coordinator in Eastern Oregon. Eastern Oregon is 40% of the size of the state, with 5% of the population. But recently, actually, we just brought aboard 2 new colleagues, Kayleen and Tracy. So I am not alone there anymore. So I kind of been lonely for a while, but now we're a great team. So I serve, and I like to describe my work in a very simple term. One way to describe it is I feel like I'm an energy prospector. I go around the community traveling slowly with an old mule and a pick and a shovel. And I am trying to find those pockets of energy, those nuggets where the communities come together to get things done in the way that they feel is most proper, more doable, and in the way that they bring the community together. So once those nuggets of energy are found, they can be explored. My job is to connect them maybe to some resources that we could have internally. Many times we don't have the resources. And that's where this great network of knowledge and connections with peers, different funders, agencies come to play. No foundation alone can solve any of the big issues. It's only by working together that we'll possibly moving the needle a little bit. Working in community also come with some, some rules. But one of the most important for me is the community speed. Things happen in a community at the perfect speed every single time. We cannot accelerate things. We need to be patiently learning and waiting. Sometimes we call them active waiting. And sometimes it takes years for those nuggets to really find the community support. But that's okay, because we are committed to be there for the long run. So nothing good ever happens fast. And so the longevity, someone said, actually Kara recently said, longevity is the superpower of place-based work, which is super cool. I didn't know that, but I can feel it. And our commitment, the commitment of our foundation to our rural community is there in perpetuity. Another couple of things quickly, and then we're open to questions. My inspiration come most of the time from those principles that Max briefly talked about, to going where the people are, to start with what we have and build on what we know, and being profoundly inclusive, which means something different in every community every time that we work. Some of our communities have a population of 24, Pilot Rock in Gillum County, 24. 9 of them serve on a city council. So 40% of the population in that particular community are elected official or appointed that way. And some of these, our community are up to 35,000 people. So it's a big spread of the continuum of rural, and we love to serve all. So the CBAs are my principle in the North Star, but the inspiration comes to me from all the volunteers that I meet every day. Many of you are here, and we met 2 decades ago doing this work. So my longevity, our longevity, and our commitment really finds your commitment as well. One more thing that I need to say: it's good to be part of a philosophy. I didn't know that. I didn't know that I was going to be part of a philosophy. My philosophy teacher in high school would be proud of me. Thank you, guys. We're here for questions, and we're so honored to have been working with you to support our rural community.
Thank you, Maurizio. And we'll pass to Brenda now, and then following Megan and Lindsay for comments from a community perspective.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Brenda Smith with the High Desert Partnership, and I am also really pleased to be part of this, and just very thankful to the Ford Family Foundation over the years. It's been a bright spot in my work with High Desert Partnership. And there's a culture of collaboration in southeastern Oregon's Harney County that really has been brewing for about 20 years. We are a nonprofit that started working about to repair poor relationships, primarily around public and private land management. 75% of Harney County is designated as public lands. And most of these challenges were historically trying to be solved by litigation, but really no one was winning on the ground. Our lands continued to degrade. Our communities were not thriving. So what we really do is we work to bring together diverse groups of partners to work together to help solve challenging and complex issues using a collaborative process and consensus decision-making. A couple of insights on our journey. We didn't have a roadmap when we started. We knew that we needed to repair poor relationships. Everyone needed to be heard. And we came to the process without any preconceived notions about what might come out of the other side of collaboration. So this really has been a learn as we grow program, and I just feel that flexibility has been a huge key to our work. The Ford Family Foundation's 4 C's community building culture really frames our work and approach. Building relationships is the basis of our work, and making connections through the most basic of actions is what we call 100 cups of coffee. Listening and understanding people, cup of coffee by cup of coffee at a time, is really how we work in community. We bring support to community work through capacity. So we do this by not leading the solutions, but supporting the solutions of the 6 different collaborative groups that we convene. So community-led action. Everyone is invited to the process, and at High Desert Partnership, we say, if you share a love and concern for Harney County, we need you at the table. As far as a little bit of perspective on the role of funders in this work, what I believe has shifted here at High Desert Partnership and even in our communities in Harney County is that with the shift in Ford Family Foundations from responsive grant making to partnering with organizations for community building, is that community members and community groups are not as threatened by a scarcity and competitive mentality. So I saw early on in my work, and I've been with High Desert Partnership for about 10 years, a reluctance of organization and even our collaborative partners to share information for fear the application they submitted to the same organization in the same community would not be funded. So this competition mentality has been really divisive in my mind around community building. So I think we've demonstrated the value of coming together with multiple partners by applying through one application that High Desert Partnership submits. We've done this actually with the Burns Paiute tribe around funding to support small businesses and entrepreneurs. We've helped our tribal partners so they don't have to administrate separate grants, and we've demonstrated to the funder that there's coordination in the community. So I feel like we really couldn't have done this unless we had not established relationships and had been working together. And with that, I just want to say that culture is what happens when the community exists. And that is a quote from Seth Godin. I would go one step more and I would say culture is when the community thrives. And with that, I'm going to pass off my piece to Megan. And so jump in there, Megan. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Brenda. And thanks to everybody at the Ford Family Foundation for putting this together. I'm Megan Fairman. I'm a co-executive director at A Greater Applegate in Southern Oregon. And my interpretation of one of the foundations of community building today is to go to where the cell phone service is when the Wi-Fi goes down. So sitting out in a little chilly but beautiful day here in the Applegate Valley. A Greater Applegate does call itself a community building organization, thanks to support and helping us get going from the Ford Family Foundation. We also have a long history in the community of the Applegate Valley, but part of that time, about 20 years of our history here, was taken into managing a county park. The county gave up management of Cantrell Buckley Park, and the community felt so strongly that they needed to save it that all the resources, time, and energy of this little organization went to saving the park for about 20 years. And then approximately 5 years ago, the county decided to take management of that park back. And so A Greater Applegate kind of got a new lease on life and got to return to some of its original intention and mission. And that is to look at how to sustain the environmental, economic, and social vitality of our rural valley. Which is quite a big and broad mission. And so the community building principles have really helped us kind of hone in on how to do that and how to articulate that and build our vision together with our community. So for those of you who don't know, the Applegate Valley is about 500 square miles. It runs between Jackson and Josephine County and even a little bit into Northern California. And it's a series of 5 recognized but unincorporated communities between Jackson and Josephine counties, which means that, you know, the multi-jurisdiction is sort of complex and adds confusion and not a clear pathway to how our community and citizens of the Applegate may come together to have the power to change or how to increase capacity. Because when you have multiple jurisdictions, but no one that has any actual leverage in our place, it's hard to know where to turn. Just to give you examples, we have addresses that don't actually match where we live. So I live in Rouge, Oregon. There is no Rouge, Oregon zip code. So all of our zip codes are Jacksonville, which is a town to the east. And then on the west end of the Applegate, it's every zip code is to Grants Pass, where there's really all these communities in the middle. So if you're looking it up on the map, it's hard to even know where we are or how to interact. So working with the Ford Family Foundation allowed us to put together a community vision process that took us out into where the people are in the 500 square mile valley. And we talked to folks all over the valley. We held multiple listening sessions, not only in the neighborhoods or drainage basins, but also, you know, with our Spanish speaking community, our businesses, our farmers, our nonprofits, and led to a multifaceted document that now is a guiding star for our work here. This has really gotten us on the ground and through that community building wheel that Max was talking about. So we did the listening to learning, and now we're really engaging and planning together. We've gotten to celebrate and reflect on certain pieces, and we're working in multiple areas that allow us to follow that community-led action and get some capacity onto the ground and into projects that are being led by our community. So the Ford Family Foundation and their funding has really helped us launch this. It's brought in other investments from the USDA, from Business Oregon, among other foundations, which has been incredibly important. But also it's important that that funding is multi-year and more long-term, because this isn't fast work. It doesn't go quickly. The laying of the mycelium network, to have those mushrooms pop up every now and then, really does take a long time, and it's not always visible until you have those moments. So with that, I think my time's about up. There's clearly a lot more to say about this, but hopefully we'll get some good questions, and I'll turn it over to Lindsay in the Illinois Valley.
Thanks, Megan. Greater Applegate is our kind of over the mountain neighbor. We're here in Southern Oregon, and I'm the executive director for the Illinois Valley Community Development Organization, or IV-CAN-DO, as we like to call it. We are a community building organization with 27 years of championing sustainable development for vibrant economic, social, and cultural conditions in our Southern Oregon region. We work in 7 different program areas and steward the community's strategic plan with 1 full-time and 6 part-time staff members and a dedicated board of directors. Program areas, Mandy, could you share those with everyone in the chat? We have 7 different program areas, and really it's more like 13. But we work in a lot of different ways in our community. But what I wanted to highlight today is, how do we get the work done, especially with such a small staff and limited resources in our area? So we do everything through the power of partnerships. It's not just a strategy, but it's the way we do our work in all directions. We work with our very local and regional nonprofit partners, our agencies, governments, and businesses to achieve our common goals, get the word out about opportunities, and plan for next steps. But we also work outside of our communities to partner with state and federal agencies to achieve things on a larger scale. Like was mentioned before, things can happen on a larger scale with the deeper pockets. And we know that we have a greater chance of accessing those larger investments and creating those bigger impacts with a history of working together. So we also know that when our community has published a clear vision and strategic plan, we can be ready when that correlating funding opportunity comes our way. So we, as I mentioned before, are the stewards of our community strategic plan. We had the last strategic planning process in 2016, and we're about to get ready for 2025 strategic planning very soon. And finally, how do we get the work done when those relationships and that trust is built and nurtured over time? These steps that start out slow could be achieved faster. And we always talk about like all the benefits of working together, but there's downfalls too. Are there downfalls of working together? So sometimes it's slow going, as was mentioned before, especially at the start. So always thinking about taking the time to make sure you're communicating really well and they are actually on the same page with your partners. Don't make assumptions. Achieve those small victories first and then move to bigger projects later. I think this was asked a little bit in the Q&A, like personalities, beliefs, political divides, that can be super challenging working in partnerships. Sometimes it seems like, oh, I could just do this on my own faster, or, I don't need them to get this done. But in true community spirit, being profoundly inclusive, of course you do. You need all of the perspectives. So seeking out ways to meet and agree on even very divisive issues. Like, for example, we're working with a partner right now who's invested in battling climate change. And in our community, the very idea of climate change is like divisive. But we can all come together and we can all agree, like the 5th season, that smoke season that we're all encountering now in, August, September is real. And that there are solutions that could benefit all of us. So we can come together around that idea, but maybe we don't call it climate change. And then finally, what's valuable about working in partnership? Partnerships with the entities outside of the region can open up those opportunities for the deeper funding and those programs that can make larger impacts. I can't emphasize that enough. And then communities, the rural communities, can offer those outside agencies and entities that lived experience and perspective of how life really is out here in rural and what the needs really are. And this is valuable information. It really allows those larger entities to ensure that they're providing the right resources and the right offerings. And it's a prime example of keeping the community at the center of the work. And we've been able to really leverage a lot of our relationships and partnerships at those state and federal levels by just allowing them to come in and listen in focus groups, to surveys, and interviews with folks who are on the ground here and who really know. So our lived experience in rural is super valuable. And I think my time is almost up. So in summary, form your partnerships here, there, and everywhere. Start small and grow into those larger opportunities. Rural experience is valuable. And the Ford Family Foundation can really be a great relationship along your journey in community building. So thank you, Ford Family Foundation, for all of the opportunities you've sent our way. And I'm going to hand it over to Cassie Allen for a presentation about evaluation and learning now.
Thanks, Lindsay. I'm going to take this back to the organizational level. Thank you, all of my fellow panelists. This has been really fun. We didn't get to practice all together, everyone who's out there attending today. So it's been really fun to listen in. So I started at the foundation about 6 months after Maurizio. So just in terms of our organizational development, this was the beginning of the Learning and Knowledge Management Department. Field coordinator was about 6 months in, and one of the first things that Anne asked me to do as president was to document how this field coordinator role unfolded and to help work with our community building department to develop some tools for how we might evaluate and monitor this really important work, because there was a shift in strategy in the department. We wanted to be sure that we were tracking on that. I think at the time we had a sense of what the field coordinator role might be, but honestly, we did not know the half of it. And I don't think we knew how important it would be to our organization long term. We did know that our board didn't quite get it, and it would be important to develop all kinds of tools so that folks could better understand that. So twice a month for those first few years, all our field coordinators were with all of our program staff learning about each other's work. So program officers are talking about their work so that field coordinators will understand it. Field coordinators are translating on the ground, bringing that back to program officers. And through those really months and months of education, what became really clear to me was that there was an organizational ethos in this field coordinator role that extended throughout the organization. It extended to our program officers, how they thought about their work. It extended to our scholarship programs and the wraparound services that we did, how we thought about our partnerships and scholarships. It extended to our grant making, our responsive grant making especially. And so in all of our work, these principles and practices that you see in the wheel were showing up in these other places. And so the more that we saw this pattern, I think the more we saw opportunities to raise it up. And as our departments were working on articulating their strategies and sharing them with our board of directors, the board also began to recognize that this community building approach was really central to who we were as a place-based rural serving organization. So by 2020, we've got these amazing community building efforts that are represented here in the Illinois Valley, High Desert Partnership, the Applegate Valley, the Greater Applegate, sorry, my bad, Megan. And so that's happening. Field coordinators really are figuring out their role. And in the middle of COVID, our organization went into a strategic planning process. And so it really should now come as no surprise, but in the moment it was very exciting that it was our board members especially who were saying, wow, this community building approach is at the heart of what we are doing as an organization. The CBA is our DNA quote that Anne alluded to earlier. I remember a board member saying, I've gone from being a community building skeptic to being a community building zealot, you know, and so it was really exciting to see how this work became a central part of our strategic plan and how we were thinking about our future direction as an organization. And so I would just add that, you know, when this is the way you operate, the learning never stops because the work and the context are always changing. I think that we have we grew to a point where we really did need to bring in an external evaluator. I think in the early years, it was particularly helpful to have an internal learning function because you're able to have those hallway conversations. You get to hit the road with a colleague and, you know, go to the Illinois Valley, go to some of these places and see the work on the ground. It's also been helpful though to bring in an external evaluator who's walking with us, who's asking hard questions, who's helping us calibrate and refine our tools. But I want to end and make all the time for questions. I think that field coordinators, especially because they were people and our colleagues, have been this embodiment of the community building approach that actually taught our foundation how to lead in a different way. Taught us that you can lead with the community out front and the community determining the pace and the direction of the work that is going to unfold there. And so even if the pace may be slower, it is super powerful and I really can't imagine us ever going back. So with that, I'll turn things back to Mandy and hopefully we can get to some of the questions here.
Thank you, everyone. I know you all and get to think and talk about community building all the time, and I am still finding myself energized and inspired even though I've read the article and I've been a part of it all along. Thank you so much for sharing just your wisdom and a lighthearted look at about the power of community building. So let's just go right into some Q&A. There was a couple great questions in the beginning that are kind of a combo about balancing foundation priorities with community priorities. There's a question about staying true to principles, but and being agnostic. And Max, I wonder if you would talk about what the balance between these two looks like.
Sure, I'm happy to kick it off, but curious what others might think too. First, I would say that the privilege of being issue agnostic, and it is a privilege, is often closely tied to the level of investment we're having in a place. And so when things are just starting off small, like, you know, Lindsay alluded, start small, that's where we can be the most issue agnostic. But as we start working with communities over longer periods of time and investing more staff and dollar resources, that's where we find that we have to have a greater connection and alignment with our strategic framework. Now, what I'd say the good news there is that that's also what's happening at communities, right? So communities are going from a specific piece of work typically to something that's more comprehensive. And something we say in our department is that all work eventually becomes comprehensive because communities are complex living structures. And our strategic priorities are family, education, and community. And it is virtually impossible for a community to do comprehensive work without addressing one, if not all of those three areas. I'll get specific. You know, when we started doing work with the Applegate Valley, you know, one of the pieces of work they were doing was really around a, you know, business directory, like who's doing what there. And so we can be pretty agnostic on that, even though that does fit into some of the work that we're doing. But that work turned into a, you know, multi-year visioning process that holds things like education and wellness for families and children and things like that. So had we on the front end saying, oh, you're doing this thing that doesn't align with sort of education and family, you know, at these tender moments, you know, this is the time to lift up the energy there, not squash it with some exterior sense that it needs to align with, you know, X, Y, and Z. principle. We know it will get there, or it's likely that it will get there, but we don't want to sort of stop this energy in the front end, especially when we know that capacity and energy, especially in our small rural places, is finite, and we want to be a group that nurtures that rather than sort of puts sort of more dampens it. Curious if Ann or others, sorry.
Yeah, can I just jump in on that? Because I think it's a great question, and it's something that philanthropy and foundations really do have to deal with, because philanthropy can't do everything. And I really think I want to just reinforce Max's point that any entry point, in fact, is probably going to get you to something more comprehensive. And so that in fact, we haven't encountered this problem that much. However, there are some specific issue areas where the Ford Family Foundation does not work that are of incredible priority to many rural communities. One of them is housing. A second one is broadband. And so just to get very concrete about how the foundation responded to that was making a change in the very flexible open door grant making called Good Neighbor Grants, which are grants that go up to $25,000. The board decided that those could be on anything that is a community priority, including things like housing and broadband which don't fit into the strategic plan framework. So there's a way to sort of help support the energy, as Max is saying in the beginning, through some grant making. And also the foundation can help make connections between communities and community and organizations around even issues that are not a priority to the foundation and other funders, either in the public sector or private sector. So those two strategies of having small good neighbor grants as an entry point and making the connections to others have been some concrete strategies that the foundation has been able to adopt.
Thank you, Ann. This is Maurizio again. Going back to the word tension, when we talked about issue agnostic and whatnot, sometimes there are simple things, a simple reminder. When I took the training for the mediation with the state of Oregon, they used a word that really impacted my work every day. And so the question is now, how can we remain impartial when the tensions grow? But how can we become co-partial? How can we learn more in communities to co-represent all the voices that we hear? And that also speaks back to equity, to the inclusion and whatnot. So the concept of learning to be more co-partial, that may not be what I feel or agree, but how can I really wear those lenses? They're never impartial, but they could become or attempt to become more co-partial for the good of the whole community. Excuse me.
Thanks, you all. Let's build on that a little more. There are several questions in the Q&A about that speak to equity, how we build trust with underserved communities. How do we take into consideration just the history that we all live with of our region and of the experiences people have. And so, Ann, I wonder if you might want to speak to what equity looks like in community building, how community building addresses power in general.
Sure, I'll start, but I'd love to have Max and Maurizio and actually the true community builders on the ground think about this too. One of the strategies for the foundation has always been to try and make sure that every voice is heard. And so when that means making extra efforts to reach those people who don't normally feel empowered to find a seat at the table. And very often those are the communities of color, especially in rural areas, tribal and Latinx. And so there has been an intentional effort all the way through to develop strategies, connections with those communities. As Max mentioned, 3 out of the 7 field coordinators are members of the Latinx or tribal communities, and that is the most important way to build trust, is to be able to go to where people are, speak the language, and to be able to connect at a cultural level and to keep inviting people in. And to be vigilant about it all the time, because it's really important not to have it be token participation. We all know how disempowering that is. And so it's about building genuine long-term relationships and being there for the long haul. And I'd invite anybody else on the screen to add to this. Maybe Brenda or Max or Mauricio.
And another thing that we learned by working in community, we need to become comfortable with 30-second silences. And we're practicing that together.
I could share more, but I know we've got only 4 minutes left, so I also know there's other questions in there. So Mandy, I'm not sure if you want to help direct us in a similar direction or a different direction, but I'll follow your lead on that.
Well, let's get to another question that's here. It's not that I'm uncomfortable with 30 seconds of silence, but another interesting question that came from one of the attendees is, this is for Cassie. It's about your characterization of the board of directors' initial skepticism about community building, their initial questions. Real quick, as we wrap up, could you address that question?
Sure. And I don't want to overstate, they were absolutely supportive, but also just couldn't wrap their hearts, minds around it in the same way. You know, we'd had a leadership program for a long time where there were countable cohorts and levels that you worked through a curriculum. And so it was just much easier to track than this thing that felt at the time, I think, a little squishy. And so I think bringing the evaluation and learning tools to the work sort of helped them see how something that was so community-centered can also be monitored and tracked, and you can bring rigor to the measurement. And so I think it just was part of the strategy transition and the value of learning tools in that situation. Yeah, thanks, Mandy. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, all right. Last words really from any of the panelists before we conclude. Any final comments?
I guess I would just like to thank all of the community builders in rural Oregon, because it is sometimes painstaking work. It is sometimes hard to keep those relationships going, especially when you live in the same community as everyone. And I know that all of you are always working so hard on the equity issues to make sure that community voices are always brought into it. And I'm really proud that there is a foundation that actually recognizes this and invests in it. But it's up to everybody who does this work every day to advocate for more support for this kind of work, because it doesn't come naturally to foundations, and it certainly doesn't come naturally to public sector funders. And we have to keep articulating the value of it, and how the long-term impact from this kind of work is so much more powerful than just one-off grant making around programmatic work. So congratulations to the community builders on this screen.
Thank you, Anne. With that, if there are no final comments from our panelists, go ahead.
Mandy, can I say one thing? I just noticed a question in the chat about, for those of you who might want to use the community building tools, it's a question about recognition. We would just be sure and cite where they came from if you use them, and we'd love to know how it goes. There are those materials that are available on our website. As Max said, we are anxious to support a community building movement in our region. So yes, please stay in touch.
And to that end, we will follow up after this with attendees with the resources that were shared in chat, as well as the slides. And within the next week or so, you should see a recording of this webinar available. If you're not already subscribed to our quarterly newsletter, you can find that at the bottom of tfff.org homepage. We go to where the people are, so we're on all the social media networks. And there is even a Rural Community Builders Facebook group that you can join to be in conversation. And I know that the people on the screen are in that group. We'd like to keep the conversation going. Thank you so much for being here. As soon as the screen closes, there will be an automatic listen to learn post-webinar survey, just asking for your thoughts. What does this bring up for you? What other questions do you have, and how might we move forward together? So with that, have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.